Okay, we are going live now.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him and glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you for this brand new session, the new Corporate Connect session that we have today. And today we have a very exciting topic, a topic that I have been personally looking for to attend and benefit from the knowledge of our guests today. The topic that we have kept for today's session is sustainable digitization and digital decarbonization for the 21st century. We are honored to have with us Mr. Ian Chu, who is the founder of the Singapore-based Greenie Web. In an era where the digital landscape is evolving at an unprecedented pace, the intersection of sustainability and digitization has become a focal point for organizations worldwide. Today's session with Mr. Ian Chu promises to provide us valuable insights and lets us know how we can navigate through the landscape in a responsible manner, and also contributing towards a sustainable and a brighter future for all of us. As staff members and students who are joining us for this session of this esteemed virtual university, the knowledge that we gain today is going to play a very important and pivotal role in shaping our approach to technology and sustainability. The importance of incorporating the eco-friendly practices and policies into our digital endeavors cannot be overstated. I encourage each one of you who are joining us today for this live session to interact freely with our guest. You can ask questions, you can make your notes. If you have your own thoughts which you would like to share, all of you who are joining us via YouTube, you can use the chat box freely to interact. It's an opportunity for all of us today to learn from Mr. Chu's expertise and apply these insights for our ongoing commitment towards excellence. I would like to once again welcome all of you to this enlightening session. And without further ado, I would like to hand over the virtual stage to Mr. Chu. But before I do that, I want to quickly introduce Mr. Chu to all of you. Mr. Chu from Greenie Web, which is a Singapore climate tech startup that decarbonizes digital infrastructure. A pioneer in the decarbonization of the digital world itself, Ian has been instrumental in dispelling the myth that going digital always equates to going green. His expertise has been picked up by the Asian Development Bank, where he was recently appointed as a resource person who will consult for an Asian Development Bank project on digitalization for green and inclusive growth. Ian also launched the 28 by 28 initiative, which is what has got us today together this year to support capacity development of the youths and young adults in sustainable digitization. As the name of the initiative suggests, Ian would be holding master classes on sustainable digitizations for faculties and students from across 28 universities around the world before COP28 this year. And we are very honored that Ian also selected the International Open University as one of those 28 universities. His master classes have benefited universities from Finland to South Africa to Singapore. An expert in this emerging field, Ian regularly engages with both national governments and international companies, providing thought leadership on the future of sustainability and digital decarbonization. Ian has been invited to speak at international tech conferences and has been guest lecturer for digital sustainability for postgraduate degree courses. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the stage to Ian. Welcome to the session, Ian, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mansur Danish, for the very kind introduction. And once again, a big thank you to the International Open University for collaborating with us on this wonderful initiative called the 28 by 28 program. Good evening from Singapore. My name is Ian, and I run Greenie Web. So what I want to do today is really bring everyone through the concepts of digital sustainability and how we as a society can move forward, not just digitally, but in a more sustainable fashion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my deck right now. And for today's session, I understand it's going to be live streamed on YouTube. So feel free to put your questions on YouTube. We do have personnel who will thereafter transfer those questions to our particular side of the session, where I'll hopefully be able to answer them towards the end. All right. So I'm just going to go into full screen right now, and we're going to begin. So good evening, everyone. This is the Digital Sustainability Masterclass for the 28 by 28 initiative. A little bit of Greenie Web before I continue. So Greenie Web is a Singaporean climate tech. And what we want to do today really is these four things, right? We want to just briefly share with you about Greenie Web. Mr. Danish just now did a wonderful introduction of us. But I just want to talk of one or two more things about what we do. Number two, we're going to talk about digital sustainability, run through the basics, and then we're going to go to each and every person, right? And share what you can do as an individual. If we do have time, and I believe we will, there is a short segment where we can have questions. And of course, I'll do my best to answer them. So a little bit of Greenie Web. It actually started off as a side project some 14 years ago. So back in 2009, it's grown leaps and bounds since, and we're currently a formally incorporated company in Singapore. I'm proud to say that we are also the leading voice of two things: sustainable digitization, as well as digital decarbonization. They are very similar sounding, but they're actually two very, very different sides of the coin. We'll go to that in a moment's time. So now let's start off with the basics, right? And the first thing I want to ask everyone, I know you can't quite answer me directly, but I want you to think about this. What is a digital carbon footprint? In other words, whenever we talk about a carbon footprint, you probably understand what is that. But what is a digital carbon footprint or a digital carbon emission? Right? What comes to mind? And the answer actually is this, right? It's fairly broad, but still very significant. It is the CO2 or carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere due to our use of a digital product or service. And then you might be wondering, when I'm using my phone to watch a video, or when I'm using my laptop to send an email, how is there CO2 generated? Well, the answer lies in the next slide, right? So on this page, what you'll see is what we call the DEC nexus. It stands for the digital or data, energy, and CO2. So D stands for data and device, E stands for energy, C stands for CO2. And what we see in this matrix right here, or rather this flow chart, is how data can actually relate to carbon, right? But there is this middle ground. So let's go through it part by part. So three major things happen to data in today's world. The first thing would be data being used in terms of communication, in terms of being able to reach out to a massive audience, right? So an example is when we use our handphones and we send a WhatsApp message or an iMessage, right, to someone else. So what happens is that data is transferred from your device, your handphone, to another person's device, right? So that's one. The other thing is, if we think of it along the lens of very complex data procedures, right? Example would be Bitcoin mining. Right? So where complex algorithmic procedures are processed in servers in a data center and consume a lot of energy. The last thing that really happens to data nowadays would be storage. Right? Imagine if you take your tablet and you take a picture of a beautiful piece of artwork and you send it up into the cloud. You load it up into a cloud storage device. This information, this data is transferred to a server and stored somewhere around the world in one of those data centers. So these data centers at hand aren't exactly energy free, right? In fact, they consume so much energy that in some parts of the world, the growth of data centers have actually put a huge strain on the energy grid. And when we look at it from the carbon lens, right, because the energy needs to come from somewhere, we see that these data centers actually aren't carbon free, because a lot of these data centers are linked directly to the grid, and they draw power that has been produced either by oil, gas, even coal, right? And that's really how we relate data to energy, energy to carbon, right? We can look at how 1 kilobyte of data is in terms of its energy consumption in a server in a data center, and how that energy relates to the carbon footprint of a power plant. So this leads us to this very big problem that we've had nowadays, right? It's what we call the digital carbon emission problem. It's a massive present day issue because at last count, right, back in 2019, the amount of greenhouse gas we put out into the atmosphere is about 3.7%. And while that number may seem small, it's actually already as large as every airplane, airport, and airline combined. So it's as large as the aviation industry. And in the last 4 years, right, so from 2019 to this year, 2023, we've seen this rapid, really rapid explosion of digital adoption around the world. And we've also seen a simultaneous decrease in aviation, at least during the pandemic years. So it's arguable that during the pandemic years, especially at the peak of the pandemic, when everyone was teleconferencing from home, while the entire aviation industry was at a standstill, that the amount of carbon emissions we have from the IT world actually exceeded that of aviation. And it's not just a big problem when we look at it from a quantum sense, right? It's also a big problem when we look at it from the lens of the future, right? Because in less than 20 years' time, so by 2040, this problem would have grown about threefold, from 3.7% all the way to 14%, right? So there's a 300% growth in less than 20 years' time. And it's not just the carbon that is a problem. Energy is a huge issue as well. It is estimated that there will be about 9% growth in terms of energy consumption per annum, because a lot of people are coming online for the first time, and people who are currently already online, they are spending far more time online on far many more devices. And that's really why we want to talk about digital sustainability today, because it's such a big problem. And what I want to do before we go a bit further is I want to really explain some key terms that you might hear me use once in a while. I think that's very important. The first thing that we want to talk about is digital decarbonization, right? It's really the decarbonization rather, of legacy infrastructure, right? So we think about how we can right the wrongs of the past. We think about how we can decarbonize existing websites, existing mobile applications, and all of the backend in the systems that we currently use. Sustainable digitization looks at it from a more forward-looking lens, right? So while digital decarbonization addresses the past, sustainable digitization addresses the future. And we're looking at how we can build new digital infrastructure with sustainability at its core, right? So how can we, for example, build new low-carbon websites? How can we build new low-carbon mobile applications? So on and so forth. And this leads me to the third point. This is something I've just put in here just in case we discuss it later. But it's a theorem that we had come up with, that I had come up with, regarding carbon and finance, right? Because one thing that I observed in the many years that I've been in this space is what I call the carbon financial divergence. It's essentially the fact that in the past, the financial cost would cap the carbon cost, but in a digital world, the financial cost no longer caps the carbon cost, right? So what do I mean for this? In the past, if I were a small business and I was trying to market my material, say I'm selling handphones, right? I would potentially print out many colorful brochures and distribute them. If I had a budget of $1 million and I would like to spend $1 on each brochure, I could give out 1 million brochures, right? And these million brochures would come with their carbon cost. But fast forward to today, if I would like to raise awareness of my company and I would like to share with the audience that I am selling handphones, I would probably go with a digital marketing campaign. I would less likely go and produce brochures. I would more likely produce emailers, messaging texts on, for example, WhatsApp, or even TikTok videos. And these instruments right now, whether they're emails, Instagram, social media, TikTok videos, all of them do not have a very set amount of financial cost. It is possible for a company, a small business in particular, to send as many emails as they want at minimal or zero cost. So in this particular instance, what we see is that even though there is a carbon cost, the lack of financial cost allows us to pollute without considering or without being restrained, rather. Right? So in the past, could only give or rather distribute 1 million envelopes or 1 million brochures because I had $1 million and each brochure cost $1. But right now, even with $1 million marketing budget, if the sending out of mass emails to tell people about my product does not cost a single cent, then I can send as many emails as I want at any frequency that I want without considering the financial cost and therefore without the carbon cost being capped. So with all these knowledge in mind, right, and all these theoretical things in mind, I want all of us to go back to ourselves, right? So now we've got a big picture. Now I want all of us to think about the more micro picture from the point of view of an individual. How can you play a role in reducing your digital carbon footprint? So I actually have a very quick exercise. I know that all of you aren't on this platform that I'm currently at to ask questions, but I know you're on YouTube anyway, right? So I would like all of you to just spend a quick moment to think about this question, right? As an individual, how can you play a role in reducing your digital carbon footprint, right? So we don't have the students on our particular platform now, nor the faculty. It's perfectly all right, but I want you to just think aloud to yourself, right? What can you do as an individual? How can you play a role in reducing your digital carbon footprint? So I'm just going to go to the next slide, and I just want to share 3 very small but amazingly impactful things that you can do. The first thing really starts with email, right? There are many estimates and they differ very widely. But one of the most striking estimates is that in the world, there are about 1 trillion emails sent. And a large proportion of those are actually junk email, spam email, right? And it's not just people with malicious intent, right, that are sending spam or junk email. A good amount of it is actually email that we actually knowingly or unknowingly subscribe to. Remember the last time you signed up for an emailer because you wanted to get that coupon, right? Or remember the last time you were unknowingly opted into an email thread simply because you had signed up for a particular membership account. So a lot of times we receive emails that we don't want, but we don't really do very much. We might delete them, we might ignore them, or we might throw them into the junk folder. But regardless of what we do, if we do not unsubscribe, the emails will keep being sent to us. And each email has a carbon footprint. There are estimates out there that one email, words only, text only, is responsible for about 5 grams of CO2. If you add pictures to an email, some multimedia, that quickly skyrockets the carbon footprint of the email to about 50 grams. So if you look at your inbox now and you see how many emails you're getting from subscriptions that you no longer want or no longer need, you can actually see a huge carbon footprint there, which is unnecessary, right? And therefore, one thing that I like to encourage people to do is really to just check your subscriptions. If you no longer want that email subscription, scroll down to the bottom of the email. There's usually an unsubscribe button. If you still want to keep tabs on certain parts of a company's sharing, but not others, right? You can always go to their subscription center and check those that you want and uncheck those that you no longer want. Second, the second thing that I like to share is really to send links and not attachments. And I think this really jives very deeply with the working world, right? So maybe the faculty members who are watching this video, or rather this live stream, and other individuals who have already begun working. One phenomenon that we've realized, very anecdotally speaking, is how a lot of times when you want to send work, right? Work in your company, work in your organization, people tend to carbon copy a lot of people, and at times even blind carbon copy a lot of people. So you have a lot of people on CC and a lot of people on BCC. And the problem is when you attach an attachment in an email and you send it to so many people, there is a large carbon cost to that. And it's very much a wasted carbon cost because very often, a lot of people on the CC or BCC never open the attachments, right? Some of them don't even read the email. So one of the things that we do suggest is if there is a company link of sorts, that you send the link rather than the attachment. So what that basically means is that if the person wants to read whatever you've sent, they can download it, and therefore there is that carbon cost to it. But if they weren't intending to read it, or they did not have time to read it, or for whatsoever reason they just did not read it, there wouldn't be that carbon cost associated with you sending the attachment to the email. The third thing really is to optimize video consumption patterns. And this is very important, right? Because video consumption patterns are, well, things that we are increasingly used to, and something that's increasingly detrimental to society. So in this slide, you can see a video. It's called Despacito, right? And this screenshot was taken a while back. But if you look at it, you realize in here, circled in red, is 8.06 billion views. That's a lot of views, right? And this video, if I'm not wrong, is still one of the top, if not still the most watched video on YouTube. But what I want to draw your attention is not to its popularity, but to the equivalence that you see at the bottom here. So an estimate has shown that at the 5 billion view mark, right, this video had already consumed as much energy as 40,000 American homes in a year. So we're not talking about the amount of energy 40,000 American homes use in a day. We're talking about the amount of energy that 40,000 American homes use in one entire year. And if we look at the total number of videos that we have on video sharing platforms, and we look at the total number of videos that we have on short video platforms, right? Those on your mobile device, we can actually add up to the energy consumption can actually be added up to that of small countries, right? So that's really the extent to which pollution, energy consumption relates to video consumption patterns. This picture here is by the Deloitte University Press, and it's a very interesting one, right? So two things that I want to draw your attention to. The first thing is this thing here, right? So we see that how back in 2013, that's just about 10 years back, right? The world had about 4.4 zettabytes worth of data. I'm not going to go through with you how many zeros that is, but that's a lot. And if you want, feel free to look it up online. But one thing that I want to show you is how this has grown 10 times from 4.4 zettabytes to about 44 zettabytes within less than 10 years, right? So it's not just how the digital universe has expanded in size, but how a lot of this data is actually unstructured. So what is structured and unstructured data? Structured data is actually data that can be used for example, the training of large language models that power artificial intelligence tools, right? But unstructured data is just that. It's just sitting there. It's just, in that sense, so as to speak, floating there. It's generally just stored in a storage server somewhere in a data center, consuming basal loads of energy without any purpose whatsoever, right? So the reason why I'm talking about unstructured data is because you and I, most, if not all of us, have taken out surveys, have contributed to the creation of data gathering, I would say procedures and data gathering kind of events and the like. And a lot of times we don't quite make use of the data. It's just left there, right? It is contributing to a larger and larger problem in terms of carbon emissions and energy consumption. And so one of the other ways to really think about critically whenever we are collecting data is whether it's absolutely necessary. Are we going to glean any insight from that? Or is this just data that we think might be useful, data that we think could be a good backup, right? So these are things that we want to think about critically, especially as we not just digitize, but we go into an AI first, an AI native kind of world. So this is a very nice table that I had found. And while the numbers here may or may not be representative depending on context, it gives you a good glimpse, I would say, a very rough, but nonetheless good glimpse into our impact on the environment. So a tree generally can take in about 10 kilograms of CO2 per year. And if you see the word here, it's CO2e, right? The E here stands for equivalence, because while we talk a lot about carbon dioxide, it is not the only greenhouse gas in the world. There actually are others that also contribute to global warming. So a tree typically can take in about 10 kilograms of CO2 per year. Of course, it depends on the age of the tree, where it's located, the size of the tree, and the like. But on average, 10 kilograms might be a good estimate. So to give you an example to something that all of you would have done, right? We look at barbecuing. So barbecuing, if you've got 8 friends, perhaps about 1 or 2 families, 8 people, then you've got essentially the emission of about 18 kilograms per evening. So it's about 18 kilograms of CO2 per evening. And if you barbecue 5 times a year, you probably need 9 trees to kind of offset that amount of carbon emission. So it's quite intensive, right? But let's look at things that we do on a daily basis, a google.com search. And so it's estimated to be perhaps about 0.09 grams of CO2 per search. But if you look at the total number of searches each day, and you multiply that by the number of days in the year, that's the equivalent of 18 million trees. And now if we talk about something very famous nowadays, right? AI. So a lot of you might use GPT 3.5 if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, or GPT-4 if you're using the paid version. But an earlier version, a version that is a bit simpler, not as complicated, not as intensive as GPT 3.5 or GPT-4, is the GPT-3 model that looks at about 175. B here stands for billion, params stands for parameters, right? And essentially what this table tells us is that the training of GPT-3, so just the training, we haven't even gone to the usage yet, of this particular AI model leads to about 85 tons of CO2 per training. That's the equivalent to about 8,500 trees. And when we look at GPT 3.5, GPT-4, we can see how the number of parameters being consumed, or rather being considered, has increased by large amounts, and how that would correspondingly also lead to a large increase in the carbon footprint of training an AI model, and of course in using the AI model. And right here is a perennial favorite in that sense, right? Of people, when they think of negative examples of technology vis-a-vis the environment, right? So Bitcoin mining. So this is a statistic that came from 2019. And essentially what it shows is that in 2019, and that's before the 2020 and 2021 Bitcoin boom, mind that. So that's before the 2020 and 2021 Bitcoin mining boom, that the amount of carbon that comes from Bitcoin is actually about 22 million tons per year. So if we consider that based on the tree here, which absorbs about 10 kilograms of CO2, that essentially is 2.2 billion trees a year, right? It's not for the entire Bitcoin mining, but per year. So if the amount has maintained in the, 4 years since, we would have potentially emitted more CO2 than the entire Earth's population of humans worth of trees would need to kind of like offset, right? So it's a huge problem, and that's why a lot of people talk about this. So what is Greenie Web doing about sustainable digitization, right? So Greenie Web is essentially looking at ways to build new digital infrastructure in a green way and to reduce CO2 emissions of existing infrastructure. Because of a technical difficulty, we won't be able to go through a quick video demonstration today. But if you're interested, feel free to contact me. Be more than happy to go through with you with that. But the three main outcomes really of what organizations, startups, companies like Greenie Web are doing. Right? The first thing is that when we think along the lines of digital sustainability and digital decarbonization, we need to understand that really that there is more than one positive impact. Even though the word here largely suggests the carbon side of things, we need to understand that the energy and data side of things also benefit. So of course, from the carbon side of things, we've got the achievement of net zero goals. That's very important both on the national level as well as an institutional or corporate level, because enabling sustainable digitization allows a company or a country to not just undergo digital transformation, it allows them to undergo green digital transformation. The second thing really is the reduction of energy consumption and utility bills. So when there is less excessive data being used, or when data is processed in a way that is of high efficiency, what we have is a reduction in energy consumption by all of your tools, your servers, and the like. And therefore, there is this financial return of investment, right? You've got companies or governments being able to save money, right? Because they are decarbonizing digital infrastructure. The last thing really is data, right? So if we can craft lightweight digital products, we can allow them to be accessible even in rural areas. We can allow them to be better accessed in areas even with basic internet infrastructure. That allows us to democratize internet-based opportunities for all communities, even rural ones, right? And two trends that really amplify the above is really how there's been this large increase in internet users and increasing internet regulation on carbon emissions. So how can you, as an audience today, also be a part? The first thing really is to always ask, right? Ask your organizations what they're doing to ensure sustainability in the digital infrastructure. Always speak during town hall sessions, university dialogues, and the like. Always emphasize about the importance of digital carbon emissions as part of organizational duty. It's not just the carbon emissions that come from cars or factories that matter. Digital carbon emissions are just as real, and they too also matter. And always act. At Greenie Web, we will be launching the Global Alliance for Sustainable Digitization, and we hope for all of you to join us and be part of this journey. So we're launching towards the end of this year, and I urge all of you to be part of this growing movement in digital sustainability. So I've come to the end of my quick session on digital sustainability. I hope that it's allowed you to understand a little bit more of what it means to be green in the digital world and why, when we are going digital, we still need to be wary of our carbon footprint. So on the screen here, there is this QR code. It goes directly to my LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me via this QR code on LinkedIn. Alternatively, you can also reach me via my Greenie Web email account. It's right here at the bottom. So it's ian@greenieweb.co. You can reach me at this email as well. So once again, thank you very much to the International Open University for this opportunity. And also a big thank you to Mr. Mansoor Danish for facilitating today's session. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be very happy to take questions right now. All right, so now I'm actually looking at the question and answer segment, and I see two questions, right? Let me just read them out for everyone's benefit. So the first question is, are there specific career paths or opportunities for students interested in sustainability and digital decarbonization? That's a very good question. So at present, unfortunately, the intersection of sustainability and the digital world is not something that is in the mainstream conversation yet. So there isn't per se a bachelor's degree or a postgraduate degree in digital sustainability. However, one could take either of the routes and still end up here. What do I mean? Members who study about the environment and sustainability in your undergraduate and postgraduate days can join the movement. Students who major in things like coding, in computer science, can also eventually join this particular movement, right? Digital sustainability is a very fresh ground, and we welcome any and all talent. So the second question that I see there is, are there successful case studies of universities effectively reducing carbon footprint traditional initiatives? I think this question has two parts, really. All right. So digital sustainability looks at how we ensure that technology itself, right, its own carbon footprint is either reduced or even achieving net zero levels, right? When we talk about digital initiatives, there is what we call tech for green as well, right? So there are two things, green tech and tech for green. Green tech is today's entire presentation, right? How do we make websites more sustainable? How do we make coding low carbon? That's green tech. When we talk about tech for green, we're thinking along the lines of how we can use technology to carry out green initiatives. An example would be, how can we use mobile applications to encourage recycling? So in that sense, it's two fundamentally different sides of the same coin, but very different nonetheless. So we think about how universities have used digital initiatives to reduce their carbon footprint. There are actually quite a few, right? Very simple example would be if a university decides to install IoT sensors that can sense where, well, in a campus, lights need to be turned off or can be turned off. So it can be turned on or turned off. Then that's a very easy way to introduce the digital world, IoT, digital technology to reducing carbon footprint. But if we're talking about in terms of sustainable digitization, digital decarbonization, at least at present, I haven't quite seen a very specific successful case study just yet. The second question that we have here today is, how can universities foster a culture of sustainability amongst students, faculty, and staff? I think first and foremost, and this is just me also sharing about the 28 by 28 initiative, I think joining the 28 by 28 initiatives and other similar initiatives can be a very good starting point. It really allows faculty and students as well to be exposed to the myriad of ways, really, that sustainability can be intertwined with our lives, and how it's of great benefit, not just to corporates or companies, but also to educational institutions as well. Besides campaigns like the 28 by 28 initiative, I think universities can also foster internal events and, of course, internal sessions to kind of kickstart the conversation. So the next question is, can the use of a dashboard system instead of the email system within the university contribute to the reduction of carbon emissions? I think that is possible. but that is very much, I would say, dependent on context, right? So at the end of the day, we need to understand the technical architecture of the dashboard system, compare that with the technical architecture of the email system. Only after which can we decide, right, meaningfully, which is greener in that sense. The other question that I've gotten today is, what are some actionable steps that university students can take to promote sustainability in their day-to-day lives and studies? I think one of the very simple things just now I shared about would really be talking about digital sustainability and sustainability in general during dialogue sessions and the like. If we talk about day-to-day lives and initiatives, I think there are plenty that can be done, really. Not just essentially email subscriptions and the like, but really whenever you watch a video on a video sharing platform, right? If your device, for example, works best at a full HD mode, then there's no need to click, for example, Ultra HD, right? If you're watching a recording of a lecture and you chose the 8K mode or the 4K mode, but your device can't quite support that, right? It's not going to actually display an 8K video for you. So these are some very simple steps that one can take. Other partnerships between universities and industry players to advance digital decarbonization efforts. How can students engage in such collaborations? I mean, for this question and the above question of successful case studies, and of course partnerships, feel free to drop me a message if you are part of a university that's interested, if you are a faculty member that's interested. Very happy to see how we can explore potential partnerships and even drive successful case studies of digital sustainability with your educational institution. Please take note that I'm not by any means limiting this partnership to educational institutions. If you are a corporate, a non-profit organization, be more than happy to talk on LinkedIn or my email as well. So the digital carbon feed of Cloud's data server is on the orbit or have a specific location. I'm not quite sure what this question means, but if I were to hazard a guess, the cloud as we know it is actually not in the clouds, right? It's actually referring to the large amount of servers in a data center. So if that's what you're asking, that's precisely where the cloud is. Final question I have here is, this world challenge digital carbon emissions footprint newly discovered or have been conceived long ago with the development or invention of digital world? Okay, so let me rephrase that question, right? I think the question means is this problem new or is it something that has been there for a long time? I think time is fairly relative. To me, it is new in the sense that in the present day, we've got a lot more awareness of this, and so it's become a problem. It's become a problem also because of the scale in which technology is used, right? If we go back in time, say 50 years ago, very few people had access to technology. And so even if there was a problem with digital carbon emission, it would be an extremely small problem. The reason why digital sustainability is such a problem now is because it's a widespread, it's because of its widespread adoption and simply because of scale, right? So in that sense, if we look at it, was it a problem from day one? I would say yes, it was a problem from day one, but it has become a significant problem now simply because of its scale and how its trajectory is looking like, right? So recall just now during the session, I shared about how it's a big problem, but not only is it big, it is growing at an extremely fast rate. So that makes it an even worse problem. Okay, final question I have here today is, how can we avoid carbon emissions and to keep privacy? I think, let me just rephrase this question here first, right? Let me unpackage this a bit. So generally speaking, you can avoid carbon footprint and still keep privacy, right? I'm not sure where reduction of digital carbon emissions can actually lead to a reduction of privacy. essentially, whenever you're reducing your digital carbon footprint, for example, you are changing your video consumption patterns to be more optimal than it once was, right? There is actually no conflict with privacy. Still get to keep your privacy, still get to keep your performance of whatever you're watching, and you still get to reduce your carbon emissions. And do you have any recommendations to researchers who may have interest in this field? I think if you are interested, feel free to drop me a message. Happy to see where we can take this discussion to. At present, up the top of my mind, I don't really have any recommendations to others. It's a very, very small field, very niche field at present. Yeah, feel free to hit me up on my LinkedIn or my email if you have interest in this area or would like to bring this conversation further. All right. So what will be the consequences of not controlling the carbon footprints to human lives on the Earth? Essentially speaking, we're going to get worse global warming. Climate change is going to be far worse. We've seen a lot of extreme weather incidences over the years, and it's only going to get worse, right? Food security is going to be an issue. The prices of everyday items, right, from food to water to energy, it's all going to be rising and at an even faster rate than now, simply because of lots of insecurity with regards to the supply of such material, and of course, because of natural disasters. And I guess this is the last question here. How is Greenie doing decarbonization? Well, so essentially, we've got a software that decarbonizes digital infrastructure. How exactly we do it, that's actually a proprietary knowledge. So unfortunately, I can't reveal that, but we do have a software, and we do also act as a couple of other things. So Greenie has a software that digitally decarbonizes existing digital infrastructure. We have an educational arm in which we provide corporate training to tech companies and other companies who might be interested in this field. We also do advisory and consultancy. So if you're thinking about digital sustainability, strategy planning, audits, and the like, all these are things that our consultancy arm actually also does. And the final thing that we do is research. So we also have research. We're actually going to launch we're going to have a large announcement on the first day of COP28, where we're going to release on our page research that we've done over the past year that targets over 100 different countries and territories, right, regarding each country's digital sustainability. So this research is going to be available on our webpage, and we're making it available for everyone to really see. And if they wish, they can also purchase a copy to understand more deeply. Yeah, so that's a little bit of my side. I'm very glad that we've had so many questions today. And as always, if there are more questions that comes up in the future, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to also drop me an email at ian@greenieweb.co. So I guess we have reached the end of our session today. I'm going to hand the time back to Mr. Mansoor Danish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that enlightening presentation. The presentation, of course, was enlightening, but the concerns that you have raised is surely not enlightening. It is a matter of serious concern that all of us have to be aware of, and that is what your session has done today. It has worked a step towards creating the awareness which should be there amongst students, amongst faculties, amongst every single member of this planet. We must be aware of the choices that we are making in terms of using of technology and so on and so forth. In fact, while the session was going on and when the questions were coming in, there's a thought which came up in my mind. When you go out to smoke a pack of cigarettes, you get your cigarettes with a statutory warning. I think the day is not far away when you will go to buy technology and you will have statutory warnings next to that as well, because we are moving towards a situation where if things are not controlled, like you rightly pointed out, it will have grave concerns on human lives and the quality of lives that we live. Thank you so much, Ian, for your presentation. It has been no doubt enlightening. It has also opened up a lot of avenues for us to see how we can collaborate in future projects. And as you mentioned, you have your Global Alliance project, which is going to get launched in the fourth quarter of 2023. We're already moving towards that. So do keep us posted about that and let us know how we can join hands with you and also assist you towards this global mission that you have and the noble mission that you have. Thank you to all of you who took your time out to attend the session on YouTube, and all of those who will be watching this session later, not on the live platform, but watching the video later. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat box. We will try to take these questions back to Mr. Chu and share his responses as and when it comes in. We would like to conclude the session then. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum.